Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. We are continuing this discussion on this Shuddhadvaita, that is the system of Vallabhacharya. So I mentioned in the last two sessions something about Vallabhacharya's unique concept of self-surrender, what he calls Atmanivedana. And that is a quick kind of hotline for one's own spiritual enlightenment. But again, you have to remember, those who have studied Advaita will find something very different, something very strange about this system, because in their tradition, in their temples, they worship a kind of child Krishna is the most common image in their temples, and that image is bathed, decorated, fed and put to sleep with great devotion, and huge quantities of different wonderful eatables items are cooked and prepared and offered. So very earthly way of worshipping the divine in a human form. And I mentioned there's something very important, that is all traditional disciplines of spiritual practices. For example, reading scriptures or praying and meditating, doing unselfish service, all these are important, but they are all considered to be different forms of secondary devotion, secondary worship, not primary. They all constitute what he calls the Maryada, means the ritualistic, the formal, mechanical disciplines. Frequently it can become very mechanical. You have to keep in mind the fact that the whole system is built upon the Bhagavata Purana, which expounds Navadha Bhakti, ninefold ways of worshipping God. That is Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Marchanam, Vandanam, Dasim, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. That is Prahlada, a little child devotee of Krishna, Lord Vishnu, is teaching his friends in the Bhagavata Purana. That means listening to prayers, listening to hymns, and then singing bhajan, singing hymns, and then remembering God's name, and then service, and then formal worship, archana, then again considering ourselves to be a servant of God, or considering ourselves to be a friend of God, considering God as a friend or God as a master. These are all different forms of what is technically called apara bhakti, means secondary, not supreme but secondary forms of worship. It's called Maryada Bhakti. Which again, there is a problem that it often depends upon our effort. So to the extent we work hard, we get the result. There is always some uncertainty, dependence upon the circumstances, whether circumstances are conducive or not, the result will be procured. If we are very sincere, we get good result, otherwise we don't get any result. But in Pushti, the concept of grace, which comes when we totally surrender to God, then what happens is everything happens all of a sudden. The whole picture changes. Our own role becomes very secondary or insignificant. So in a way, it is some kind of what we call catharsis. It's a Greek, coming from Greek word, which means purging our mind of all negative emotions, conflicts, total relief. Getting all strong emotions and negativities out of our system. Kind of self-refining process. Purging, purifying. Now, when we do that, our whole system gets purified. This leads to some kind of a spiritual renewal and a release of inner tension and a feeling and a conflict or doubts in our mind whether we are actually praying in a proper manner, we are doing ritualistic worship in a proper manner, we are singing the hymns in a proper manner, whether we are sincere or not, this kind of self-doubt and the tensions and the conflicts that arising out of our own inner helplessness, all these are totally removed, released, and our emotional system gets completely stabilized and spiritualized. This is the unique feature of this Pushti Marga. Pushti, here you remember, Pushti means grace. You have to remember, there is a lot of criticism against Vallabhacharya, not always fully justified. If you go to the temples, you find huge quantities of all the Haldiram, all these laddus and all the wonderful eatable things are piled up in huge quantities, and child Krishna is decorated with expensive clothing, the ornaments, and then the elaborate kind of service done, which is part of what seva. So frequently this can lead to the wrong idea, the misconception that it is some kind of having a good life. But that is a totally unjustified criticism. But the real meaning, as I mentioned in the last session, the real meaning of Pushti is Anugraha. It comes from the well-known sloka from the Bhagavata Purana, means Poshanam Tad Anugraha. Poshana means, Pushti means God's grace. So when you get God's grace, then you are totally released from all your entanglements. We are totally free from all our self-doubts. So, and again, and more importantly, very often our own sincerity and the effectiveness of our spiritual practices very often depend upon our own samskaras. Sincerity depends on samskaras. There are many negative samskaras that frequently create obstacles in our spiritual path. Now, when you totally surrender Atma Nivedana, the ninth of the Navadha Bhakti, ninefold Bhakti, Bhagavata Purana, the ninth is Atma Nivedana. So, you begin with the last. In the Sanskrit verse, Sravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Marchanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. The ninth item is Atma Nivedana, total self-surrender, which in a traditional way, if you look at the traditional interpretation, it comes at the last, the final goal. But Vallabhacharya said, no, you can begin with the last. What happens? Because when we totally surrender ourselves to God, emotionally, physically, what happens is our mental system gets totally freed from all entanglements, all inner conflicts, and our spiritual life suddenly takes off. This is the unique aspect of Vallabhacharya's system. Otherwise, those who have studied Advaita, this may look slightly primitive, because Advaita tells you that God is a transcendental, omnipresent, immanent reality, present everywhere in everything. After listening to this, suddenly you are talking about God as a child Krishna, and you decorate it nicely, put in wonderful clothes and ornaments and huge quantities of Haldiram Sona, Papadi, all the laddus and jalebis piling up in front of the deity and worshipping, and then people may think this is something very strange, but there is a great spiritual truth in it. When you do this with total dedication, the same very concrete, very gross external form of worship becomes an expression of our total self-surrender. And when this self-surrender actually becomes sincere, then the bargain is closed and we also become a tool in the hands of God. This is an important thing to remember. So, one may wonder, is it too philosophical? Maybe there is not the same level of philosophical, metaphysical grandeur in Vallabha's system, but there is a great spiritual truth in it. I mentioned earlier, Ajayamilo Bhakhyanam is it is an important episode mentioned in the Bhagavata Purana when a man who is about to die, he suddenly remembered God's name. Though he called his son to his side, whose name was the name as a synonym of God, whom he was worshipping as a young man. Suddenly the thought came to him and immediately he got released because suddenly his mind went back to those times. So this is very important. Now, once this is done, this Atma Nivedana is done, then you start practicing seva, service. Now, service is an important element in Bhagavata Purana. Sarva bhudeshu yapashyet bhagavad bhavam atmanaka bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavadottamaha. So the definition of the highest devotee in the Bhagavata Purana, Nimi Navayogi Samvada, in the 11th skandha it comes, the highest devotee is one who sees God in everyone and everyone and everything in God. So in that case, the service itself becomes a service of humanity. But that is frequently mechanically confined to service done in a shrine to an image. But if that is done with all sincerity, it can develop into a sense of service to the entire humanity. So for humanity becomes Pada Seva is the meaning. Pada means serving to the feet of the Lord. The feet of the Lord is humanity, human society. Society, living human beings is the Pada, the feet of the Lord. Serving the living human beings around becomes an expression of spirituality. Now this service takes three forms in Vallabhacharya system: Kaiga, Vittaja and Manasika. So Kaiga means physical. Doing service physically, you do service with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness and devotion. You clean the temple, offer this to the Lord with full emotion. The point is, when we do that, our emotions are purified. Even if you don't believe in God, still if you can bring in an element of sanctity and sacredness into what we do, that itself will have a transforming effect on our life. It's a catharsis. So I'm not going into those details because more related to the ancient Greek tragedies. Pity and horror, we have a refining effect in the mental system. You watch a great tragedy like Othello, Shakespeare's Othello, all people are familiar with. When you watch a Greek tragedy of ancient times, the original definition goes back to the age of ancient Greek tragedies. When you watch a tragic tragedy, a drama, or maybe in modern times a movie, when you watch it, and you find unpleasant things happening. But after it is over, you find your own emotions somewhat refined. You move away from the theater a wiser person. Because seeing the tragic events give us a sense of the finality or the impermanence or the end of all wonderful things. There is an unpleasant side to every pleasant aspect. There is a happiness, this unhappiness dimension to every happiness. Life is two coins, two sides of the coin, happiness and unhappiness. So when we watch something terrible happening in front of us, it will have a purifying effect on the mind, a renewal, release all the strong emotions and feelings. It's called catharsis. So like that, when we totally surrender with all sincerity to God's grace, it becomes something catharsis. It purifies, it purges our mind, cleanses the mind of all strong emotions and feelings and tensions. So in that case, it has got a great effect. So the easiest way to begin the spiritual practice is Kaiga Seva, doing service to the physical level. Then Vittaja, what you can do in terms of money, whatever maybe your resources, you do that is service of the Lord. And then Manasika, mentally, spiritual disciplines. So all can be a very wonderful way of beginning a spiritual life. When we do a physical service, for example, when you clean the temple, Vallabhacharya system do seva in the temple. What happens is we are doing things for which we are not paid. So there is an element of lack of desire, total freedom from desire or selfish motive when we do something as an act of service. That unselfishness aspect will have a cleansing effect, cleaning effect, purging effect, a refining effect on our mind, emotions, feelings, samskaras, vasanas, and our mind slowly begins to evolve. So this is what really happens when a devotee gets this Brahma Sambandha mantra, that is a mantra which is taught to a devotee at the time of initiation, the formal initiation. Now we'll go to some important scriptural sources of the system. There are a number of books associated with Vallabhacharya system. The total number of books mostly 4, but there are other books also. In one of the book I mentioned this, in Shuddhadvaita Martanda, Maya Sambandharekidam Shuddham Idi Uchade Buddhaihi Karyakarana Rupam Ki Shuddham Brahmanna Mayikam. This is how they call it Shuddhadvaita, pure Advaita. Now those who are familiar with Advaita, they know that Advaita tells you there is one absolute supreme reality that is all-pervading, immanent, omnipresent and transcendental. And in order to explain everything else, Shankaracharya, the exponent of Advaita, brings in Maya. But this Maya is frequently wrongly interpreted by non-Advaitins as a different category, another category. So the Advaita is not pure. Advaita means a system of philosophy. It posits one supreme reality, absolute reality. Everything else is relative. But many non-Advaitins sometimes raise this criticism against Advaita, saying that Advaita is not pure because it brings in Maya. Maya is not a category in Advaita. Maya is only a way of explaining away the wrong notion that this world is real. By showing that this world is not absolutely real, it's only relative. The absolute reality is only Brahman. Now, you have to keep this tendency among non-Advaitins who criticize Advaita, that he says, Maya Sambandharekhitam Shuddham iti uchyade buddhaihi. That is a Shuddhadvaita Martanda. Karyakarana Rupam ki Shuddham Brahma na Mayikam. So, Brahman is only reality. There is no concept of Maya in Vallabha system. So, it is pure, it is Shuddham Advaitam. So, that's a justification for their criticism that Advaita of Shankara is not Shuddham, is not pure. Vallabhacharya system alone can be called Shuddhadvaita. So, it's actually some more of a it is a solipsism, maybe a dialectical, polemical twist. That's all we can say about this view of Shuddhadvaitins. And again, they have mentioned this another not so very important book, not as important as Anubhashya, which Vallabhacharya wrote and his commentary on Brahma Sutra. This another book is called Antakarana Prabodha. So it says, Param Brahmadu Krishno hi Satchidanandagam Brihad. This is also another an important statement, but it comes in Siddhanta Muktavali. Siddhanta Muktavali is a book. There are many books with the same title, but this is a particular book belonging to Vallabhacharya system. Param Brahmadu Krishno hi Satchidanandagam Brihad. So, Param Brahman, Supreme Brahman is only Krishna, and that is Satchidananda. Krishna Param Nasi Devam Vastudo Dosha Varjitam Antakarana Prabodha. These are different statements coming from Vallabhacharya. Means there is no reality, there is no supreme reality other than Krishna. That Krishna has a definite form, Balakrishna child form, and that Krishna has to be decorated, bathed and worshipped and served. These are the now all these ideas do have a basis on Bhagavata Purana, but the point is Bhagavata Purana contains many other great ideas. Bhagavata Purana contains many purely Advaitic ideas, but Vallabhacharya took some of the ideas which are not actually Advaitic from metaphysical point of view. If you study the Advaita system of Shankaracharya, you may not fully agree with this. Again, he says, Tasma sarvatmana nityam Sri Krishna sharanam mama vadanthireva sadadam sayamityeva me matihi. So again, Tasmat sarvatmana nityam Sri Krishna paramam, Sri Krishna sharanam mama. So Sri Krishna sharanam mama. This is a mantra that you have to utter. Sri Krishna is my supreme refuge. Everyone should utter this mantra with a sense of total surrender. That is Atma Nivedana. And this one should repeat every day. It's called Atma Nivedana mantra. Just got this very long mantra is there. Atmanasaha samarpayami dasoham Krishna tavasmi. So, hey Krishna, I am your servant. I completely surrender myself to you. This is called, this Atma Nivedana mantra. So, it is said that Vallabhacharya himself collected many images of Lord Krishna. And he distributed among his devotees. And he established an elaborate system of initiation, which includes mantras. Many of these mantras, unlike mantras which are actually not written about openly, but some of these mantras are written. See, for example, Sakasra, Parivatsaramit, etc. There are long mantras he himself composed. But the most important part is Atmana Saha Samarpayami Dasoham Krishna Tavasmi. I am Krishna, Aham Tava Dasoham. I am Lord Krishna, I am your servant. And I dedicate myself and everything with me, everything that I have to you. So this is again, this idea comes from Bhagavata Purana, but Vallabhacharya developed the whole concept from Bhagavata Purana. And not only that, he even went to the extent of quoting Upanishad mantras, which perhaps more logically have an Advaitic meaning, but he put it in a different, with a different emphasis, to prove that many of these Upanishad mantras are in support of his own concept of kripa, grace, and self-surrender. One mantra that he frequently quotes is that is Nayamatma Pravachanena Lebhyaha Namedhaya Na Bhudasudena Yamaivaisha Vrunade Tena Lebhyaha Tasesha Atma Vivrunade Tanum Siyad. So that's what he quotes actually. So he says, and again, Tamakrudu Pashchadi Vigita Chokha Dhatu Prasadat Mahimanam Atmaraha. Two mantras, one from Mundaga, another Kathopanishad. Good example of how a mantra, a Sanskrit statement, which have a clear Advaitic meaning, is interpreted in the light of this concept of self-surrender and God's grace by Vallabhacharya. For example, the first mantra in Mundaka says, Nayamatma Pravachanena Lebhya. There are similar mantras in Kathopanishad also. This Atman cannot be attained or realized by scholarship, by reading books, by intellect, na medhaya, na bhudasudena, or great scholarship. What the Atman accepts, recognizes and accepts and honors, that person alone, the one whom Atman accepts and honors, he alone can understand Atman. But what it means is, in Advaitic sense, what it means is, when we remove all negativity, all wrong notions, all wrong concepts from our mind. What is left behind is the truth. So all scriptures are trying to remove wrong notions. Because the right understanding is not a product of any scriptural study. The right understanding is self-evident. To give the example of the analogy of the serpent and the rope, the snake and rope. The fact that it is rope alone, rope only, is not because it is not snake. Even if you consider it is a snake, it will be rope only. When you bring light, you are not creating rope, but you only remove the wrong notion that you had. The wrong notion was that you thought it is a serpent. That's a wrong notion. That is gone when you bring light. The fact it is rope is self-evident. Like that, the supreme spiritual realization according to Advaita cannot be attained by scholarship, by books, by studies, or by intellect. It is something that is self-realized within. Now here, Vallabhacharya will tell you, Atma Vivrunudai means God shows grace. Atma here means Krishna. So the one whom God blesses, to whom God showers His grace, to whom God shows His kindness and compassion, he alone can understand spiritual realization, can reach spiritual truth, can attain spiritual enlightenment. Otherwise not. So here again, when we surrender, then God accepts us and God shows His grace. Otherwise not. It's very similar to many of the Abrahamic traditions, Christianity and other religions, where God's grace is important. In Advaita, when we remove all wrong notions, then what is self-evident, which doesn't require any effort to realize, which is self-evident, is Atman. When you remove the wrong notion that it is a snake, what is left behind is, what is left out is the fact it is a rope, the old analogy. Again, tamakradu pashyadi vida sogha dhatu prasadat mahimanam atmana. This also from Kathopanishad. So, what it says, anoraniyan makhato mahiyan atmasi jendo nikhidam gukhayam tamakradu pashyadi vida sogha dhatu prasadat mahimanam atmana. Kathopanishad. Vallabhacharya will tell you, well, dhatu prasada means God's grace. So, dhatu prasada in Advaita actually means chitta shuddhi. Through karma yoga, through any of the other practices, you attain purity, then you get the knowledge and then you get spiritual enlightenment. That is, karma nishthayaha chitta shuddhi dvarena pushartha hedutuna swadandriyana jnana nisthatu swadandriyana pushartha heduhu anyana apeksha. Shankaracharya Bhashya. It means when you practice karma yoga or bhakti yoga, any yoga, you become mentally pure. When your mind becomes pure of all wrong notions, what is left out is the right notion, Atman. But Vallabhacharya will tell you, it is all God's grace only. It means spiritual enlightenment is something that we are given by God. This idea behind. Though the system is completely built upon Bhagavata Purana, it takes from Bhagavata Purana only that aspect which is closely, intimately related to Pushti Marga. And that's why, the one important statement, those of you can remember in the Bhagavata Purana, it comes to second skandha, 10th chapter, 2nd verse, that is, Sthiti Vaikuntha Vijaya Poshanam Tadanugraha Manandirani Sadharma Udaya Karma Vasana. Here means Poshanam Tad Anugraha. One statement. Poshanam means pushti, grace. So Poshanam is defined, described as God's grace. And when you get God's grace, then you become a recipient of spiritual knowledge, and that leads to spiritual nourishment. In that sense, the word pushti in other meaning also is acceptable. So, Vallabhacharya made a great contribution to Indian philosophy in a very unique manner. First, that is, he emphasized, he stressed the very concept of Sharanagati or Prapatti that was earlier expounded by Ramanuja and Vedanta Desika and Sudarshana Surya and others, those who belong to Sri Vaishnava tradition, Ramanuja tradition. Ramanuja, the credit for emphasizing Prapatti or Sharanagati or self-surrender in a very philosophical manner, taking examples from Lakshmi, Tantra and other books, that credit goes to Ramanuja system. But that idea is taken by Vallabhacharya and re-emphasized and focused in a specific manner. And for that, he includes Bhagavata Purana as one of the important foundational texts of Vedanta. Remember, in the traditional Vedantic heritage hierarchy, three important books are considered to be triple foundations. One is the Vedas or the Upanishads, the primary foundation. Second, Brahma Sutras, which logically take statements from the Upanishads and Vedas and analyzes and expounds a system of philosophy. Shankaracharya built his Advaita system in this manner, while Ramanuja in his Sri Bhashya, he did the same thing. So also Madhvacharya in his own Brahma Sutra Bhashya. But Vallabhacharya brings in Bhagavata Purana as the fourth foundational text. So he called it Prasthana Chatushtrayam. So Prasthana Trayam is commonly accepted by all the Vedanta Acharyas, Vedanta philosophers. Whether Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka and others. But Vallabhacharya brings in Bhagavata Purana as an important authentic textbook and gives the same importance that is normally given to the Vedas or Brahma Sutras. And he calls it Prasthana Chatushtrayam, that is Upanishad, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavata Purana. This is a very unique contribution that he made to Indian philosophy. You don't find this emphasis in any other tradition. Importance given to Bhagavata Purana as one of the foundations, one of the prasthanas, which is called Prasthana Chatushtrayam. Matta Paradharmnanya Kinchidasti Dhananjaya. All these statements he repeats again and again. It comes in the Bhagavad Gita. There is nothing in this world except everything comes from me, emerges. So the point is, when it is interpreted by Shankaracharya, the word aham, I, is interpreted as Atman, as Brahman, as the all-pervading supreme reality, as the attributeless, transcendental, indescribable, non-definable, spiritual reality, which is the basis of everything. This is Shankara's interpretation. But Vallabhacharya says it is a word coming from God, Krishna. Nothing wrong in it, we have to remember. You have to accept very clearly the fact that Vallabhacharya differed from Advaitins, but at the same time he was a very sattvic, very humble devotee of God, and he started a tradition which was very helpful for people in those times. As I mentioned earlier, he lived in a very, very difficult era of Indian history, politically, culturally, and socially. The country was facing foreign invasions, temples were being destroyed, Hinduism was being persecuted by invaders. But you have to remember, India was divided into in hundreds of small tiny kingdoms, not today's India. That time India is not, there was no real India as we understand today. It consisted of hundreds of small tiny kingdoms. So each of these tiny kingdoms was fighting with each other naturally. So foreign invaders came and destroyed and all that. So the political turmoil, turbulence of those times also influenced the formation of this attitude. Like he says, in these difficult times, you have to pray to God. The ideal of self-surrender alone really works. And also he also emphasized certain statements from the Bhagavad Gita, Ananya Chindayanto Mam Ye Jana Patrivasade Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam Yogakshemam Vahamyaham. It comes in the 9th chapter. What he says is a very famous statement. What he says is, those who are dedicated to God, without any other thought, with total dedication, single-minded devotion, totally devoted to God, all their welfare is being taken care of Lord Krishna, God. That's the meaning of the statement. Yogakshemam Vahamyaham. Whatever they have will be preserved. Whatever they don't have, if they need, will be given to them. Yogankshema. So, Vallabhacharya gave a lot of importance to these statements. And that's why he said, if you dedicate yourself to the Lord, then there is no problem for you. Everything will be taken care of God. That's why Pushti Marga is looked upon as a complete system of spiritual discipline. Whenever we feel that we are not able to practice spiritual disciplines properly, whenever we feel also helpless, Varamananda calls it aginjanyam ananyagaditvam. We feel totally helpless, and also we feel there is no other refuge, then we dedicate ourselves to the Lord. So that's the idea. That the Atma Nivedana mantra. He composed his mantra, Sri Krishna Paramamama. He repeated again and again, this statement, that is, Sri Krishna is the only reality, Sri Krishna is my supreme refuge. Krishna Param Nasti Devam Vastudo Dosha Varjidam. There is no other reality, divine reality, other than Krishna. Krishna is pure, totally free from any imperfections. Again, Param Brahmadu Krishnohi, Satchidananda Brihata. This again, so this is called Pearl Necklace, the name of the book. It's called Siddhanta Muktabali. So he says, Satchidananda Brahman is Krishna alone, nobody else other than Krishna. So you can find, he also emphasized that everything happens by God's grace. Vishesha buddhe vivaram manakrit pasyami yanna vyavaharanyat. So there is nothing in this world but God's grace working in so many different ways. So I have tried to give a bird view of Vallabhacharya's system. After this, I will discuss Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system, that is called Achintya Bheda, which also considers Krishna as the supreme Godhead, and of course worshipped along with Radha. And in a way, it's a difference, and non-difference combined together. It's all mentioned. Again, there is the element of Shuddhadvaita in it, and Dvaita in it, and Bheda, all can be found in so many, in different aspects in the system of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Is called Achintya Bheda. We will discuss that maybe from next session onwards. We can have interaction right now because there is no time to begin a new session. So you can ask questions in a general way, not only based on Vallabhacharya's system. We have plenty of time today, and I am concluding Vallabhacharya's philosophy with today's session. And next session we will begin Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system, which I actually linked to some of the movements which are quite popular in modern times, like ISKCON and Hare Krishna movement, all are taking their inspiration from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which again, from a metaphysical sense, it is linked to Madhva system. So Madhvacharya to Chaitanya and right up to our own times is Prabhupada and all different teachers. Okay, now we can have interaction in a general way. Okay, thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj. Before we get to the two hands that I see raised so far, there is a question on the YouTube live stream.
Yeah.
And that question I was given permission to ask on their behalf.
Yeah.
I'll read it verbatim.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm entangled with emotions from past and present. It seems a tall order to look or invent a catharsis. Does our current emotional life connect us with others, all those we come in contact?
Yeah. You know, when I brought in this idea of catharsis, what I meant was release of all the emotions and feelings are completely transforming the spiritual devotee. So when you feel that you cannot take care of your own spiritual destiny, you want to pray but you cannot pray, mind is not willing. You want to do service for a higher purpose, but again frequently there are mental obstacles, doubts, and this conflict between what we want to do and what our mind is willing to permit us to do. So this struggle is very common among spiritual teachers. You can see the dark night of the soul, well known. The dark night of the soul is a well-known phenomenon. You can find this being expounded in so many different ways by the great Christian mystics of medieval times. In his most eloquent language you find in the Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross and many others you find. So, if one can, with all sincerity, they give the entire responsibility to God, as Bobby Coleman mentioned in the last session about this Girichandra Ghosh giving the power of attorney to Sri Ramakrishna. But Girichandra Ghosh, about unique quality, was totally 100% sincere. He cannot keep something in mind and say something else. So mind, that is thought, word and deed. Thought, word and deed. If they all become the same, then when you actually say Sri Krishna Param Mama, Sri Krishna Saranam Mama, Sri Krishna is my only refuge, Krishna Param Nasti Deva. I mean, there is nobody other than Krishna, and Sri Krishna Paramam, Sri Krishna Saranam Mama, Sri Krishna is my only refuge. When you do that, then the same thought, same word, same action, life, then becomes a reality. In normal people, it doesn't become a reality because there is slight, when you open a number key, everything should be in the same line, otherwise the key won't open. The thought, that is a mind, word that we speak, we utter this mantra, Sri Krishna Sarana Mama, and Atmanivedana mantra, and also our action. When they're the same, then it becomes a reality. Mind is freed from all entanglements. Otherwise, we'll be fighting with our own samskaras. Our mind we'll have so many minds to deal with. Our mind is split into so many pieces, mutually conflicting each other. There is no integrity. Part of the mind wants to meditate and pray. The other part of the mind wants to go and see a movie. Another part of the mind wants to see a TV, whatever it is. So there is always this conflict. That's why Vallabhacharya emphasizes this Kayiga Seva, means physical service. When we do physical service, there is less conflict. When we want to read the Bhagavad Gita or Sermon on the Mount or maybe a thriller, mind sometimes goes towards a thriller. So frequently it's very difficult to control the mind. But suppose physically we take the car, go out and go to a temple, a holy place, and do some physical service. We have more autonomy, more freedom when it comes to physical action. Point is, the physical actions eventually will influence the mind. And the conflict between what we want to do and what our mind is allowing to do, that conflict is reduced gradually when we practice Kayika Seva, physical service. So also, Vittaja is mentioned here. You do some kind of service, whatever resources you have got, help a good cause. One may wonder how this happens. A man who loves money, if willing to spend a little bit of money for some higher cause, then he will always remember he has done something. That itself will have a refining effect. Not all of a sudden, not a totally transformative effect. Slowly, he will develop an inclination to use his resources for some higher purpose. So mind slowly begins to move. So it's almost like eating a truckload of grass to get a little protein. It's a slow process, but still some result is always produced. So that's why this ritualistic worship, ritualistic worship is not the path of Vallabha. Vallabhacharya did not recommend the formal ritualistic worship, remember. In a case, actually what he recommended, worship was to be done in the real presence of God, the image, in a non-ritualistic manner. So you are preparing a lot of things, placing before the Lord, and you pray and you sing bhajans, you sing songs and all that. So it is more real, but that will always have a positive effect on the mind. So physical service, though a very gross form of spiritual discipline, is also a guaranteed road that can lead to higher levels of spiritual evolution. That's what Vallabhacharya says. It's a fact. From a psychological point of view, it's a fact.
Thank you, Maharaj. I mean, before we get to the raised hands, I'll take a moment to just re-emphasize what you said about the poignant historical context of Vallabhacharya's emergence.
Yeah.
If things are very difficult in terms of access to temple and in terms of the distractions and particular vulnerabilities that people are feeling at that time, and for those who have those samskaras, have those characteristics, this is a magnificent alternative for those people. It's very ironic that the questioner from the YouTube stream was feeling these particular types of vulnerabilities that historically Acharya was addressing.
Yeah, and he himself, that you are absolutely correct. In fact, there is one book, Krishna says Stotram, it says, Mlecha akranteshu deseshu payapaiga nilayeshu cha satpriyada vyagrilokeshu Krishna eva gadir mama gangadi tirthavaryeshu dustehi ravuteshu iha tirohidadi daiveshu Krishna eva gadir mama, etc. River Ganga, Saraswati, Yamuna. Saraswati did not exist as a living river, but these holy concepts are being polluted or being degraded, violated. Again, there is a lot of persecution of good people, devotees of God, taking place in these terrible times. Lord Krishna, you are the only refuge. So, there is an element of pathos and helplessness created by the social conditions, political upheavals, cataclysmic changes, including foreign invasions. That is a time when the northern states of India were facing a lot of Islamic invasions, which led to a lot of destruction of temples and forcible conversion of people. You have to remember, India was divided into small, tiny kingdoms, hundreds of, maybe Even when British left India in 1947, India had more than close to 600 kingdoms. So naturally, there was no sense of national unity. There was no united India as we understand today. So Vallabhacharya, again, he was essentially, his family belonged to Andhra Pradesh, South India, but his parents lived in Benares, and he heard about the news that Muslim invasion is imminent. Parents traveled southward, didn't reach his hometown. On the way, Champaranya, this place, the child was born and he was left alone. He was perhaps, they thought the child is lifeless, they left behind, keeping the little child within a, under a tree in a hidden place. So they leave the child, comes to life, let him survive. And the parents were helpless. They were invaders, enemies chasing them. After some time, they found the child has come alive. And that's how Vallabhacharya was born. There are a lot of miraculous stories about him. So all these aspects should be kept in mind. So he became a teacher of this philosophy of total surrender to God. There's an element of pathos in it, It's a very useful question, thank you. That's why I mentioned catharsis, So catharsis here, I am not taking in the sense it is interpreted in critical literature, especially in books written on, critical literature on Greek tragedies or anything. But I'm talking about a kind of emotional release coming out of a sense of total helplessness of one's own resources, and you turn to the God. So that's what it signifies. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
You mentioned in the Vallabhacharya path, start with Atma Nivedana.
Yeah.
Offering the self. When you engage in the other nine, other methods, the ninefold path in the Bhagavata.
Yeah.
You do seva, etc., etc. Success in this depends on how sincerely you are able to do everything.
Yeah.
It depends on your past, depends on grace.
Yeah, really, what happens is, so I should explain this, thank you for the question. Vallabhacharya analyzes this Navavidha Bhakti, ninefold devotional disciplines. Sravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. Okay. Now, Prahlada's instruction to other children, his friends, in the Bhagavata Purana. Now, which means listening to God's stories, then singing songs, devotional songs, and then remembering, then doing service, and then doing worship, and then doing all this, you prostrating before the deity, and then considering God as our master or our friend. And then ninth is Atmanivedana. Now, he analyzes these ninefold disciplines. He puts them in two different categories. One category is called Madhyada Bhakti, Apara Bhakti, secondary Bhakti. What it means is, you get up in the morning, you have read books, you know how to read, how to do puja, you know how to pray, you know how to perform all the ritualistic worship. And a lot of your own effort is involved. And then sometimes you may feel, well, the way I prayed, the way I worship is not okay. I didn't do it properly. A lot of inner conflict. Still you do your best. Now, this is okay, but here there are some limitations. First of all, whatever you do, you will have some strong selfish desire. You may not proclaim it, but in your mind there is a hidden desire to get something out of doing puja, out of doing worship, out of doing prayer. The possibility is there. That's why he says, in doing karma, there is always the phalapeksha. There is always the possibility that it may become dependent upon result, a desire for result. There is always a lot of this possibility that things may not be done the way it is to be done. Now, and then according to traditional interpretation, last item is Atma Nivedana, total self-surrender. Now, Vallabhacharya puts a different style. He says, suppose you cannot do anything. You do one thing, you surrender yourself to the Lord. You cannot get up in the morning, take bath and pray. You become lazy. Your job will not permit you. There are many encumbrances. You cannot go to a temple. You don't want to, but you try. There are some other inconveniences. And then again, you want to read some scriptures, but mind somehow feels lazy, lethargy. You cannot do that. And then you want to discuss spiritual topics with your friends, but your friends discuss something else which you don't like. Number of obstacles. Okay. You want to read Bhagavad Gita, but there is also a thriller, a film magazine. I'm not criticizing movies or anything about that. But you rather, today I will read this film magazine, tomorrow I will read Bhagavad Gita. Today I will go to see something, maybe a place where I can have a good time instead of going to temple. So mind may dissuade you, distract you in a different direction. You have no control over this. You try your best, but you feel totally helpless. At the same time, you are a sincere devotee. What do? One day you decide, well, I don't make my own effort any longer. I leave it to you. This is Atma Nivedana. Now, this is mentioned, Vallabhacharya gives a lot of importance to the 66th mantra, 66th sloka of 18th chapter. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam praja aham tva sarvabhebhyo mokshayishyami masicha. Which is very important for Ramanuja's system of philosophy. Vallabhacharya also says this is very important. So you take complete refuge. When you do this, if you are sincere, you find your life is beginning to change. What happens if this is sincere? It should not be a pretension, a caricature, just formality. It's a real thing. Then what happens is, it will have a completely transformative effect on your lifestyle. Totally. It may not happen immediately, but it begins to happen immediately. It will happen in course of time. The beginning is that once you totally surrender. So you can begin with the 9th. Then you don't have to worry about practicing the other 8. That is Vallabhacharya system, Pushti Marga. Pushti is grace. You take refuge in God's grace. That's what he called it. If it is sincere...
A related question.
Yeah.
So in Ramanuja's Akinjani was being utterly destitute.
Yeah, same thing.
Swami is no other refuge.
Yeah, see,
what does Ramanuja say about cultivating this? Is it again grace?
Ramanujacharya interprets this using analyzing the whole process in 6 stages. Atma Nivedana is emphasized by Ramanujacharya also. Ramanuja Anugulisya Sankalpraha Pradik Ulisya Varjanam Rakshasrititi Vishwasa Goptrutta Varanam Dha Atma Niksheba Karparne Shadvidha Sharanakati. Ramanujacharya says. So Atma Niksheba is a word used by Ramanuja. Atma Nivedana mantra. Atma Nivedana is the word used by Vallabhacharya. The same thing. But Ramanuja says the other 5 factors are angas or parts of the main element, that is self-surrender. To be able to practice self-surrender, you should also be able to practice, first of all, you holding fast to positive ideas, getting rid of all negative things and believe that God is your own sole protector and total conviction, strong belief that God will protect you. And so all these are important. Then only you can practice Atma Niksheba. Self-surrender. But Vallabhacharya doesn't go like that. He says, don't worry about anything. Well, today only you close the bargain. God is now your burden to take care of me. I have nothing else to do. I can't do anything. This is the end of it. If you look at the history of many of the great mystics, great spiritual personalities, who had difficult past lives, I mean difficult times in the early phase of their life, they could become great saints because they did practice what Vallabhacharya calls Pushti Marga, which of course you can imagine Saint Francis of Assisi was a soldier. St. Augustine, his own mother was worried about him. And you find many such great mystics who are in Indian tradition, this Tulsidas, the great devotee poet. So are examples. So, in the case of Vallabhacharya, he emphasized this path because of the difficult situation, political situation, social conditions, which Bobby Coleman just referred to. So he was giving an alternate path to devotees of God. You don't worry, you leave it to God. You cannot go to temples, you cannot travel. There were robbers and violent people in the forest region, forest path. They could not travel from place to place, and they cannot make pilgrimages in those days. All right, you sit in your place and devote yourself, you dedicate yourself completely to God. This is what he did. So, the Pushti Marga is a kind of overemphasized element of Ramanuja's Atma Nikshepa. That's all. He focused on that. Don't ever imagine that the credit for introducing this idea goes to Vallabha. No, actually this concept was practiced by spiritual seekers all over the world, in all higher traditions, spiritual traditions. But he emphasized this in a particular context, in Anubhashya and other books. That's the idea.
Thank you so
Hello,
much.
Swami.
Yeah.
I have a question. In this series, and related to Madhvacharya and Ramanuja and Shankara, are you going to talk about Tantra? Because Tantric system seems to combine Dvaita and Advaita. Is Tantra going to be something you'll compare and contrast?
No. There are Shaiva Tantra, Shakta Tantra, Vaishnava Tantras, different. But that concept is highly misunderstood and misinterpreted in modern times. Sometimes in a very, very ridiculous way. People don't. If you look at the life of Sri Ramakrishna, here, if you read his life, you find he purified. One of the signal contributions of Sri Ramakrishna was that he purified, he removed many misconceptions about Tantra tradition. See, to practice Tantra, you should be at the peak of renunciation, purity of mind, unselfishness, total dedication, absolute purity mentally, physically, emotionally. One should be at the peak of purity. Then only one can realize the supreme truth through the path of Tantra. Otherwise, it can lead to so many questionable ideas and misinterpretations, so it's a difficult. But I can't say whether I may include this or not. But now I have to go through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system, and then I will discuss Buddhism, which is a very well known and very popular, very relevant system of philosophy. Buddhism is a vast subject. Philosophically, spiritually, it is as important as Advaita in modern times. So I may not discuss Tantra right now. After discussing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system, I may discuss Buddhism. Buddhism means early Buddhism, based on the Pali canonical literature, and also the four schools of later Buddhism, we call Sautrantikas, Vaibhashikas, Vijnanavadin, and Shunyavadin. So it may take a long time. Okay, later we can discuss. Please remind me later. Thank you.
Yes, I have another question.
Yeah, most welcome.
What is the relationship of faith to surrender? They talk about the need to surrender to God. What's the relationship of faith and surrender?
Yeah. You know, if the faith is very genuine, very sincere, this surrender becomes very natural. But frequently, faith is only just an acceptance, an intellectual acceptance of an idea or a concept. So, beyond the concept, one should go deeper, and when the belief, faith becomes real part of the emotional system, then surrender becomes very natural. Absolutely, very natural. Faith is important, no doubt, but there are two levels in faith. One is we try to believe, we try to have faith. So we say, I believe in this, I have faith in this. The other one is faith becomes very genuine. When it becomes very genuine, then self-surrender is very simple. For that, you know, see Girish Chandra Ghosh story. That level of intensity and genuineness and, mind that is thought, word and deed should be on the same line. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Swamiji, I had a question of clarification.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Navanivedana of Vallabhacharya a couple of times, the
Yeah.
9 forms of worship that he recommended.
Yeah.
And elsewhere we've read about Shuddhadvaita, the 16 forms of worship that others have recommended. So, on what basis are these chosen and recommended? Is there a connection to their epistemological approach, or how do they arrive at what they recommend and what they don't recommend in terms of forms of worship in the different systems that we've studied?
Yeah, then a very relevant question. Vallabhacharya doesn't have anything to do with ritualistic worship. But the Shodasha Puja, Pancha Puja, Dasha Puja, different elements of worship with 16 elements called Shodasha Puja, 10 elements called Dasha Puja, 5 called Pancha Puja. Vallabha's system of worship is totally non-ritualistic. And it believes, for example, you bathe Lord Balakrishna's, child Krishna's image, and you decorate it, put flowers, and you place before the image all different items of food, and put him to sleep. Now here, it is a kind of totally non-ritualistic approach. There is nothing mechanical about it. In ritualistic worship, there is always the possibility that it can become extremely mechanical. But Vallabha builds his system upon the idea that one should be totally sincere. Once you surrender yourself to the Lord, the image itself becomes the reality, God. Image is the same as God. If one can totally believe that this beautiful image is the image of the Lord, and then pray to the Lord, the prayer will have a real effect. That's an important thing. Very often in spiritual life, mind plays a very important role. Mind plays a very, very important role. If you read the life of these great mystics I'm talking about, if they reached a point where they could not turn any other direction. If they had not undergone this transformation, they will perish mentally. You can imagine, they reached a point of total helplessness. There is nowhere else to turn. So they self-surrendered. That is what Vallabhacharya calls pushti. A total helplessness, not being able to turn any other direction, without having anything else to do. There is no other refuge, no other way. At the same time, the devotee feels a kind of total helplessness within. At that time, If the devotee doesn't undergo transformation, there will be no destiny. He may either perish or he may go insane. That's, if you read the stories of the great mystics, you can see that. So, there is no scope for any kind of formal ritualistic worship or anything. That's why, you look at Sri Ramakrishna's life. Sri Ramakrishna at the very beginning, he was very careful about doing puja, plucking flowers. Gradually, he realized the highest Advaitic truth. Everywhere the same reality, he could not pluck flowers. Flowers also is divine. The bilva leaf is divine. Everything is an expression of the divine. So he transcended the level of ritualistic worship. In fact, if you look at the whole thing from an exclusively spiritual perspective, Pushtimarga is technically the same as Advaita. Only Vallabhacharya has to put in a different language for the people around. The same Pushti, Vallabhacharya system is emphasized by Shankaracharya in Bhavani Ashtagam. Gadistum, Gadistum, Tameka Bhavani. Shankaracharya uses the concept of taking total refuge in God, saying that total refuge is the divine feminine reality, Bhavani. God appearing, manifesting as the divine feminine. The same as God appearing as the divine Lord Krishna for Vallabha. So remember, the same Pushti concept you find in Advaita also, really speaking. From a spiritual perspective, from the standpoint of spiritual experience perspective, there is no difference. Difference is only when you look at the whole thing from a philosophical perspective. I mentioned this earlier. Ramanuja, he talked about the Saranagati. Actually, 400 years before Ramanuja, Shankaracharya already written Bhavani Ashtagam. He could have read it. There was no need for him to start the non-Saranagati, the concept of self-refuge. Shankaracharya had already written about it. See that? Bhavani Ashtagam and so on. From a spiritual perspective, it is a state of human evolution. But again you have to remember, Vallabhacharya's time, the time of lot of social turmoil, political turmoil, distractions and many other problems in society. So he was actually presenting before the society a quick hotline, take refuge in God. That's the idea behind, yeah.
Hello. My question is about this mantra, Shri Krishna Charanam Mama.
Yeah.
So, I think this Pushti Marg exists now, right? I have a friend who's a Westerner. She is part of Pushti Marg, and she chants this mantra, Shri Krishna Charanam Mama. This very beautiful mantra.
Yeah.
So, what happens? I mean, we have this translation of it. I take refuge in Krishna. What happens when you repeat this mantra over and over and over again?
Yeah, this is something that's normally given kind of initiation. Normally, it's not something that we can talk too much about because it is something intimately related to one's own individual spiritual practice. If the person sincerely believes in what he chants sincerely, then it becomes a real thing for him. It will have a transformative effect on his life. No doubt about it. If he repeats with full dedication, it will have an effect. If he repeats mechanically, then also it will have some effect, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. So, it's more like confession. If you do confession very sincerely, then it becomes a new life for him next day onwards, Monday onwards, a new life. That's an important thing. So the same idea, from a spiritual perspective, you find there are many common ideas in Christianity and also Hindu devotional tradition, very, very similar. Because spiritual life is the same everywhere, actually. spirituality is common everywhere. The ritualistic, the theological, the dogmatic, doctrinal system may be different, but from the standpoint of spiritual evolution, it's the same thing.
Okay, thanks. Swami, I was wondering, how does absolute surrender fit in with the concept or the chant Om Tat Sat? And I think maybe you just answered this, that if you actually approach Om Tat Sat with absolute sanctity and spirituality, that is absolute surrender. Is that the way that one would do that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the Pushti Marga is an established hierarchical tradition started by Vallabhacharya, which has its own formal practices, and it's its own established tradition. Riyom Tat Sat is a mantra. If one fully understands the meaning, then it will have some effect. But it may not have the same effect if you don't take this instruction from a teacher. According to Pushti Marga, you have to go to a teacher, you have to get this instruction, then you have to utter some mantras, then he will give you a garland, a tulasi, or there's an established tradition among them. It's a hierarchy, and it had its important role during the 15th and 16th centuries. It also helped the development of a devotional tradition and practices in certain parts of India. Hariyom Tat Sat is a mantra that is used, a Vedic mantra, you find in the Vedas, Upanishads. So it is a sacred mantra. It's not related to Pushti Marga. Okay, that's one thing. Yeah.
Yes, I understand. I think I understand that. I'm saying, not in terms of a ritualistic, but an individual, if you approach that, I mean, with Om Tat Sat,
That
is the surrender, right? To accept this.
You are right. If a person sincerely chants this mantra, it will have certainly an effect. You find your mind becomes calm and quiet and serene when we practice this with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. No doubt about it. Because mantra has been purified by many great saints, many sages for centuries, thousands of years. When they chant this mantra, they meditated on this mantra. So the mantra becomes a vibrant spiritual force. And when you recite in the 21st century with all dedication, sense of sanctity and sacredness, then actually it will have its effect, no doubt about it. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll begin next class. We'll discuss the school of Achintya Bheda Bheda Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.